All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you had a good lunch. Our talk is drinking from the Firehose. So just a brief introduction about ourselves. So we are from General Motors. We have a diverse team of over 150,000 employees spanning across almost every continent around the globe. We operate across 22 different time zones, and we have facilities ranging from offices, manufacturing locations, and third parties. So who we are, my name is Joseph Feather. Currently, I work in the vulnerability management space. In my previous roles, though, I was a security engineer as well as a security analyst. I've been working on the cyber defense team here at General Motors for over 9 years. My background is really in security. I got my master's from Carnegie Mellon, and my real passions are data, security, and automation.
Hi, my name is Tim Heilman. I'm currently working as a detection solutions architect for General Motors in the cyber defense team. I've been in IT for 29 years, 9 of which I've been at General Motors. The last 5 years I've been in cyber defense. I have my master's in computer information systems with a focus on security from a school right around the corner here, Boston University. Go Terriers. Also, we'd like to send out a special thanks to a few people who have been instrumental in making our NSM detection and visibility capabilities what it is today. So I'd like to thank Jason Taylor, Corey Thomas, Bam Vischer, Charles Pfaff, and Dustin Monte. Okay, so as we get started, throughout the talk today, you're going to hear me use terms such as NSM, sensors, logical sensors. So to define that a little bit for you, NSM, of course, everybody knows that's our network security monitoring. But if I say sensor, it's going to be like one of our single detection devices or a logical sensor. So it might be a full box or a logical sensor. At GM, necessity is the mother invention. So through various reasons for cost and maybe in some of our smaller locations, we have actually put multiple logical sensors on a physical device. That might be a talk for a future SuriCon, but so if I mention a logical sensor, it'll be an instance of Suricata and the associated tools on a physical box. Our NSM build consists of Suricata, Zeek, and NetSniff-NG. And we use NSM at General Motors in a passive capacitance, so out-of-band detections of compromises within our system. Our team does not own the network, but we are in charge of detection tools for our detect and response teams. So for our out-of-band use of NSM, we put taps in specific locations in our networks throughout the networks, and we funnel that traffic through packet brokers and packet aggregation systems to our detect tools. So we detect and we capture full PCAP. So this is where drinking from the Firehose comes in. So part of it, anyways. We do full PCAP on different areas of our network, which includes ingress, egress, third party, remote access, and lateral traffic. We analyze approximately 350 terabytes of traffic each day. We maintain 5 days of PCAP, so if you do quick math, that's about 1.75 petabytes of storage just for PCAP. And then from that analysis, we actually ingest around 18 to 20 terabytes of metadata every day into our back-end systems. So when we talk about drinking from the Firehose, it's not just coming in from network traffic alone, but it's our back-end data systems that are drinking from the Firehose as well. So let's talk a little bit about tapping strategy. Throughout your where you get your data from through storage on NSM, throughout that whole data path, there's opportunity to lose traffic, lose PCAP and traffic. And it's very important that as you design your visibility, that you do it in a manner where you won't lose that visibility or have zero visibility loss. So, but as we talk about that, let's focus a little bit about the tapping infrastructure itself. Because we use NSM to detect compromises, our analysts need to know what the true source and true destination of those attacks are. So when we tap around the around devices that might NAT or proxy traffic. So if you see in the diagram here, we have an example of taps around a firewall. That way you can get the true source and true destination, because if anywhere in your network you're proxying or NATing traffic, if you're on one side only, you will only get the endpoint device that you're going to, like a proxy or firewall, and maybe the source or the destination. You will not get both. So you have to tap on both sides and collect that traffic so that you can, through your investigations, determine where the traffic is actually coming from and actually going. Then we feed that traffic down to some kind of packet broker. There are several different kinds. I'll talk to that a little bit later. But the traffic will have to be aggregated back into and disseminated to your NSM sensors. And then your analysts can have access to the metadata on one side and our PCAP from the other. They can pull it from the console side. So, tapping or span ports, what is better? There's a lot of talk about, well, I could just take my traffic and do a monitor port on the switch and pipe it in, and you can. But as you'll see that there's pros and cons to doing both, and so let's focus a little bit on the taps themselves. With tapping, here you can see in this diagram we have a tap between two physical devices, so you'll be breaking your networks and putting taps in place. So here we have like a router connected to a switch. The tap will be sized according to that wire that is going through. So you will see all the traffic that is going through, crossing that tap. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing that you need to keep in mind with tapping, though, is that you will need some kind of packet broker or something that can aggregate that traffic back together, because you'll see the router is plugged into port A for monitoring, and then for the network side, I should say, and then your other device, like a switch or whatever, is connected on the B side. And taps by nature will only send to the monitor ports the transmit of that one device that's going in. So the device that's plugged into port A, its transmit will be on port C, the monitoring port C, and the transmit of device B will be on port D. So if you use a tapping infrastructure, you'll need two connections going to your packet brokers for each tap that you put into place. So as you design your systems, you'll want to accommodate for that. Some other considerations too, for copper requires power. And so if there is a failure in your tap, they fail open or closed, however you want to electronically consider that, but it allows the traffic to still continue to pass. But if you have redundant high available systems, like you're tapping on your egress or ingress, and you have two sets of firewalls, two sets of routers, two sets of switches for high availability, that little electrical blip will cause it to fail over. So that's just something you want to keep in mind. Fiber is a little different. It doesn't require any power because it's just mirrors and glass, and so. But there is a consideration for. There's a slight little bit of signal loss, but usually you're going to be tapping so close to between devices that that's really negligible. So the other thing that tapping allows you to do too is you're going to be tapping according to infrastructure. You're going to be hitting pinch points up in your network, and that's where you're going to want to put your taps. If you have a super flat network, that can get costly. You'll be putting taps everywhere, but you look for the natural pinch points to tap at, like around firewalls, IPSs, load balancers, or proxies, or something like that, where traffic gets funneled through. And as infrastructure changes, unless you're doing some crazy filtering on your packet broker, as new VLANs get added, because you'll be tapping like trunks or something like that, they'll automatically go in. But again, you'll also want to make sure you work with your network teams closely. We have a separate network team because you may not want to see all the different VLANs that are going across that. So you may be doing some filtering on your packet broker. But if you're not, then as new infrastructure comes in, it'll naturally flow across those, and you should be able to pick those up automatically. Now, spans, on the other hand, they're a great choice if you don't have taps available, you're in a smaller location, you don't want to spend the money on infrastructure for packet brokers and taps. They're good for small environments, but the thing you need to remember about spans or monitoring ports on your switches is that, let's take, for example, you have a switch that is, you've got like a 40-port gigabit switch, but you only have 10 gig interfaces that you could possibly use for a monitor port, right? So if you do the math, you can see how you could quickly oversubscribe the span port or the monitor port, and you would start dropping packets on your visibility, right? And you don't want to do that. I think if you remember a couple of SuriCons ago, I think it was in Vancouver, where they talked about how the loss of data, PCAP to alert loss, is exponential. So 0 to like 20% packet loss, and you might as well not even have a NSM monitor in place because it's really not going to give you any significant alerts. The other thing too is monitor ports, the backplane of your switch. If it gets heavily used, maybe you're not oversubscribing on your monitor port, but if that backplane gets saturated, it's going to drop that monitor port in order to deliver real traffic. So just some considerations with that. Both will definitely work. Now, the great thing about packet brokers and aggregation is the ability to load balance. There are many different broker technologies out there. Like one that was mentioned earlier was Gigamon. There's Appcon. Arista just bought out Big Switch. So they have different capabilities. So do your research on how you want to do, what functionality is important to you, and if you're going to buy some kind of packet broker system, just do your research and see which is the best for your environment. So with a packet broker system, in your more complex networks, where like at General Motors, I mentioned we observe traffic and egress, ingress, remote access, third party. We tune those sensors, specifically the rule set for that environment, because a lot of them are really hot. And so by reducing the rule set you need on Suricata and tuning it for that environment is important. So you'll find that like with egress, you might, having high available systems, you'll want to match the traffic on both sides, on both your redundant sides, take those taps and funnel it to the appropriate sensor. So with packet aggregation, with the packet brokers, you can easily do that. The other thing that's great about packet brokers is, especially in your busier environments where, because we do full PCAP, we have to, you can't have tons of storage. We need to try and maintain 5 days. So load balancing helps us to put large volumes of data in a specific sensor group by spanning it across several devices in a load balance group. So here in this example, you can see that we have 2 different sensor types on each of the devices, and we have multiple devices hooked up to our packet broker here. And how it works is that as each new session comes in, the way we've set it up is each new session gets rotated to the next NSM sensor in line. It just round robins through all of them. As new sessions are created, just pops on the next one, the next one, and the next one. The other thing that's great too with the packet brokering is if your traffic shifts from one environment to another. Think about COVID. Like for us, we had everybody working in the office, right? And our remote access was hardly used at all. But as soon as everybody left the office, cleared out, and they started working from home, our remote access sensors got hammered. So what you can do is you can look at, everything is logical. You don't need to move cables. Once it's all set up, it's all software based for us. We have all our NSM sensors set up through configuration management, and so for us, it's on our end. We can change the sensor type on a box very easily. We can work with the visibility team in shifting the type of data that we see coming to that device from one traffic source to another. So if you find that some of your sensors are now underutilized, you can easily shift them to another sensor group, right? And so that's a really another great thing about having it hooked up to a packet broker. So now to get it down to the NSM sensor itself, and as I had mentioned, we put in most of our locations, the majority of our locations, we have 2 NSM sensors, logical sensors per physical box. And how we do that is we put an NSM sensor on each of the pneumanodes. So our build here, we have 2 core or 2 CPU devices, each with their own, of course, based on the pneumanodes. These have each 128 gigabyte of RAM for each pneumanode, and we make sure that we have NICs on each pneumanode. So, and that's super important because anytime you cross pneumanodes, you're going to have some inefficiencies in moving that data. So we streamline it where we have one NSM sensor on one pneumanode, the other on the other. And because we are doing full PCAP, you're still going to have crossover to the other pneumanode because your I/O is going to be on the other side. But the important part is really to keep it in line with a NIC, and so that you don't have any inefficiencies or loss there. This example here I have, you can see on our kernel, we isolate cores for our builds, the NSM, and for Suricata, NetSniff, and Zeek. So we leave about half a dozen cores for the OS to do what it needs to do, its maintenance and whatever, and then we restrict the rest to our NSM build. You can see here in the Suricata YAML, And it's important to look at how your NUMA nodes are, how they're built out. So the core numbering for all of our NSMs that we've had, we use Intel. The even cores are on one NUMA node and the odd cores on the other. I have an example of a Suricata YAML here where you can see that we leave a couple for Suricata management and then the rest for detect. And so this is going to be one side, so we assign the even numbers to that. For capturing PCAP, we use NetSniff-NG, as I said. And this configuration, there's a couple of important points that you want to take here. The ring size is 1. You want to adjust that ring size setting to the volume of traffic that you're getting into the environment. The big thing is to make sure that you have your data available to your analysts in near real time. So if you make that ring size too big, it has to hit that threshold before it writes to disk. So you don't want to have it too big. You have it too small, and you could start dropping packets to your storage. So that you'll have to figure out how that works for you. For us, and we have it in, that's our default, and with configuration management, we can adjust that according to environment. So if we have a slower environment, we can drop it down. If we have a faster environment, we can bring it up. The other important thing to note is the interval. So we create new PCAP files every 2 gig. And the reason for that is somewhat for management, but also for searchability. Our PCAP agent, when it searches the file, think about if you only had a single file that you were writing PCAP to. At the end of the day, that file would be tremendous. And if your analyst is looking for a specific PCAP somewhere at the end of the day, basically what our agent does is it does like a rewrite, a replay of the PCAP, and then with a BPF filter based on source and destination IPs, ports, and time frame. So by having it broke up into smaller chunks, our PCAP agent is smart enough to only grab the PCAP files that fit within that time frame. So that reduces the amount of time it takes to generate that PCAP to send to the analyst so that they can bring it up in Wireshark. So that pretty much covers at a high level what we do for ingesting the data. Now I'm going to turn it over to Joe as he connects the dots from ingestion and logging to investigation.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim, for that great overview there. So the diagram here, this is really a depiction of kind of how we design the sensors and then how we kind of connect everything together. So across our environment, we have over 200 logical sensors, I think around 150 physical servers across the environment. Those all send their data back to our main database server. So this is where we store things like the alert data that Suricata generates, as well as the packet data that generated the alert. But we also take all of the Eve JSON log files and we push that off into an Elastic Stack where the analyst can have access to the data. And the real key here is we're collecting all of the metadata, all the alert data, basically so the analysts have the capability to pivot back into the sessions that happened before and after the alert and have full PCAP to everything that happened at the time of compromise or the time of the event. And then down on the bottom here is just a quick preview of our Analyst Console. All right. So the real challenge for us is, as Tim mentioned, right, it's around 1.75, 2 petabytes of PCAP data that we need to search through for maybe a single session that may only be a couple bytes long. So how do we do that, right? So across all of our sensors, we have about 18 terabytes of the Suricata JSON collected a day. And that provides the metadata or the key in order to pivot back into where that PCAP is stored. So the important points for us are the sensor, the NSM sensor where the alert was generated, the time that alert happened, as well as the tuple of the source IP, dest IP, source port, dest port. And with that, we can basically do a TCP dump, do a merge cap, and kick it back out to the analyst. So what we do, focus there in red, right? We have file beats that is reading those JSON files, whether it's the alert, DNS, flow, HTTP, whatever it may be. We pipe it out to Logstash. Logstash gets it into Elasticsearch, and that's where our analyst can search it from. So our Elasticsearch is one of the areas that we've actually had a lot of struggles over the years, piecing together and getting to work right. Our goal is to have 30 days of searchable NSM data that is ready at a moment's notice. So we're expecting search times of less than 1 second for any query that an analyst may submit. We also have a requirement of 6 months of at least cold storage. So if we have an alert that we need to investigate that happened 2, 3, 6 months ago, we have that data that we can bring back on the hot side and search it there. And on average, we're peaking currently around 275,000 events, and that tends to grow as we deploy more sensors across our environment. For that LXAC, basically what we do is we take all of our NSM sensors, we have that file beat agent that is reading all the log files, we pipe that into Kafka. From the queuing mechanism there, we can pipe it into our Elasticsearch data nodes. Current size is around 120 data nodes, but again, that number goes up and down as our amount of data changes as well as our retention time. The keys around kind of the Elasticsearch side that they need to focus on is the CPU and memory requirements for ingesting the data, the I/O requirements for writing it to disk, and then also being able to handle all the searches that go on. So we really tune our Elastic cluster for indexing, right? Because we're taking in 20 terabytes of data a day, and our searches are really infrequent. And infrequent, we might have a couple hundred or maybe 1,000 or so queries a day versus the billions of events that we're pushing into it. And in total, the Elastic cluster is currently holding about 1.2 petabytes of data. And again, that's all near real-time searching, less than a second is our goal. All right, so how does the analyst interact with all this data, right? We have all these sensors, we have all this elk data, and what we currently use, some of you may recognize as Squeal. It's an oldie but a goodie. The author of this tool, Bam, he's a member of our team at General Motors, and it provides some really in-depth data quickly to the analyst, which is one of the reasons why it's stuck around for so long. So I have the main Analyst Console pulled up here. We have a list of all the alerts that have happened across the environment. The analyst is presented with some data such as the sensor, where the alert happened, a unique identifier for the alert, the timestamp, IPs, ports, as well as the name of the role that may have triggered. In the bottom right section of the screen, the analyst has the capability to pull down the actual SuriCata rule. So in real time, right, they can click show rule. They have full access to what it alerted on. So all of our analysts are pretty fluent in rule writing, so they can kind of pick apart, see the content sections or the patterns that the rule is looking for. And then also in the bottom right, you have the actual packet that triggered the alert. So you can do some real quick triage here in order to identify if it's malicious traffic or some type of false positive. The example here, you can actually see the GET request going to 0.0.0 on port 42000. Bottom left corner of the screen, you can also do some DNS type lookups, some internal queries that we can do to help identify the assets that are impacted for the particular alert. So also in this view, you have the ability to kind of pivot down into the data. So with a quick right click here, you can query our Elasticsearch data, we can query the flow data, the HTTP data, and again, all of that metadata that we generated, we can actually pull the full PCAP on. So for example, here's a quick query that I did on the source IP here. So this is all of the sessions that happened before and after the alert. And this is really the key that we're trying to give our analysts. We might see a beacon to a particular piece of malware, but where was it downloaded from? When did it get downloaded? What happened before and after? Those are the questions we're trying to answer. And by providing all of the sessions and flows here, we can help color in that picture. And again, the analyst is able to collect any one of these items, which is straight out of Elasticsearch, do a right click, and pull it up into Wireshark. So here's just a quick example of that alert that we've been tracking, and you can see that we pulled this down, and we have the full, TCP, the handshake back and forth, and the GET request as well as the response back. Additionally, all of this data is not only available in the Squeal UI, it's also available in Kibana, and we get all the benefits of that. So we can pull any field that is generated across the JSON data, we can put it into a dashboard, we can do a visualization, we can use the flow ID that SuriCata provides us, and we can actually pivot between the flow and the DNS or the HTTP or whatever other metadata that may have been triggered based on this flow, and it's really helpful for pivoting back and forth between this data and searching through the, let's say 1.2 petabytes of metadata and all of the data that we store on disk as well. All right, so as I mentioned, right, there's been a lot of challenges along the way to get to. Whenever I joined the team, we had 2 NSM servers. Now we're up over 140 physical servers, over 200 logical. We've had challenges around, how do we configure SuriCata to handle the flows? How do we push out rules to all of these devices? Where do we send all of the data that gets generated? And how do we do that with a relatively small team? Things that we worry about is how expensive our servers cost. We don't have unlimited budget, so we have to keep everything within a certain guideline. We need at least 5 days of PCAP retention, so no matter where we collect, no matter where we analyze traffic, we have a hard requirement of we need 5 days of retention. And then again, all of the issues that come across with managing hundreds of servers around health of the hardware, hard disks that are failing, other monitoring issues. These are all things that we've had to deal with along the way.
I think we're running tight on time, but just really quick, some of the future things that we're looking to do, very high level, making SuriCata our single application on the sensor. So taking over the Zeek functionality and PCAP capture. That's one of our upcoming big challenges that we're going to try and accomplish. How are we doing on time? Are we?
Got a timer right there.
Okay. Oh, we still got 9 minutes left. Oh, okay. Cool. So.
But I know there's some questions in the audience.
Yep. So I will go ahead and leave it there. And if anyone has any questions, feel free.